Goeienaand luisteraars en baie welkom hier by ons het koppe bymekaar. Dis Ronel Lemmer wat met julle vanaand gesels en ek het weer 'n wonderlike interessante gas vir ons saamgebring. En ek dink julle sal onthou ek het met Catherine Eybers gesels, baie interessante gesprek gehad oor wat sy alles daar op haar plaas doen en sy het toe vir my vertel van Layla. En sy het vir my gesê Layla is baie jonk, but Layla Staegemann. Layla, I'm so happy to have you here. En luisteraars, as julle kan sien hoe jonk sy is, sy's pragtig. Julle gaan vir ons later soek op die YouTube om te kyk hoe mooi sy is en hoe pragtig sy is. En dis 'n jong vrou met 'n baie interessante passie. Layla, welcome so much here at Eden FM. I'm so happy to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ronald. It's so lovely to be here, and thanks to Kath for she's sent so many wonderful people and so much wonderful work our way. We're always so grateful for our connection with her.
Where do you live, Layla?
So I live on the Seven Passes between Knysna and Sedgefield, right up against the Knysna Forest at the moment. I live on a farm. My partner, Jake, is the farmer of Valley chickens, pasture-raised chicken. So we live on a little pasture-raised chicken farm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So where do you come from? Were you born there in the Southern Cape?
Where do you come from? Yeah, so I was born actually in Featherbed on the Western Head in Knysna.
Oh, wow.
Which was a very, very lucky place to be born. My mom was very brave to give birth to me at home, right there under the Milkwoods on a nature reserve. So my connection with nature started very young in Featherbed, and then we moved up to Renendale, and I grew up in Bibby's Hook, which is just outside of Knysna, right up against the Knysna Forest. So I was here for 18 years, and then I was gone for about 6 years, and then I came back.
But Renendale is also quite a fantastic place to live in, I always think, so natural and a lovely...
Yeah, it's a beautiful place to live. Yeah.
Away from all the city life.
Yeah, exactly. And so lucky to be so close to the forest, and still in driving, distance to the ocean, and just close to a small town like Knysna. It's a very lovely place to grow up.
Layla, Kath told me that you are doing some interesting things, really, really interesting things. And I want you to tell the listeners what it is that you do.
So my work has a kind of two different parts. The one part is I work with Six Kingdoms Ecological Design, which is an ecological landscaping company here in the Garden Route. And the other part of my work is I work in, it's hard to kind of place it, it's not quite social development, it's like human nature interaction, where I work both with youth and with food growing, and particularly with communities that have been previously disadvantaged and don't have access to like towns or more on the rural edges. So two different parts.
Yeah. What did you say? Human nature? Just say that sentence again. Human nature connected.
So human nature, kind of all of my work centers around human and nature relationship.
Human and nature. Yeah, sorry. Human and nature relationship. That is interesting.
Yeah, it's got many parts to it.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it. What is your passion and where does it come from?
So I suppose it has to kind of have the story of where I developed it, or where I got to this interest. Was when I left school, I couldn't quite decide if I wanted to study marine biology or social work, which was obviously very different. And I got into Stellenbosch for social work, and I really wanted to go to UCT for marine biology, and something happened in my family where I wasn't able to go to university at all. And I ended up going overseas to work and earn money to be able to come home and go take myself to university. And I think from then, even though I didn't really know it as much as such a young person, I knew that I was interested in that kind of in the crux between where humans and nature engage, and our relationship and connection to nature, and also disconnection from nature. So I knew I wanted to work in the social workspace, but I was also a complete nature nerd from when I was very young, and really loved like spending time in the forest and in the ocean and learning about fish and learning about the trees and really like wanting to gather information and learn. So I really wasn't sure between those two things. And then I spent 6 years. I was very lucky to be able to travel and work all over the world, like in various things. That's a whole story. But through all my work, that really came up for me constantly, was this disconnect. In some place, I worked in high-end hospitality where people are completely disassociated from nature, and kind of but are very unhappy and spend very little time in nature. And then in other work where I lived, in rural India, where people have so little in terms of assets or, financial capital, but their natural assets and their connection to nature is so strong and so rich. And that really interested me as a young mind, like, well, how is it that we've become so disassociated from nature through the system that we currently live in? And how can we find our way back? And I was always looking for, how do I work in the kind of doorway where I can invite people in and really spark that curiosity for nature and that reason to fall in love with it. So that for me is kind of my passion, is really like how to create a curiosity to learn more about nature and to fall in love with nature, rather than just kind of a lot of what a lot of people I feel do in like right now and where we are, is to talk a lot about it, but we don't have a true, like a deep connection with why, everyone's like, oh, climate change and all these things and what we should be doing. But a lot of the time there's not a deep, like inherent connection with why, for that individual, like why should we be doing these things? Why do we need to care? Like, oh, so we don't go extinct. But I think there's so much when we start to learn about nature and really spend time connecting with ourselves inside of nature, then we start to go, okay, like actually I really love it here, so that's why I should care.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. What I like what you say is that you're working with the connection, but also the disconnection and the disconnect, and to understand how did we get disconnected and how to make the link again. So you kind of the missing link for us to get us back into nature. Or that's what your goal is, to get people curious again. I like how you describe yourself as a nature nerd. I like that.
Yeah.
I think it's on your status where it says, if I don't answer immediately, I'm out looking for bugs.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't. I'm not good at answering immediately on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it's because I'm just, I think it's so noisy, like WhatsApp and social media and all these
Yes.
things. And if I don't very consciously spend time away from my phone, then it's just with me all the time, So, and it often is looking at tiny insects.
So nature for you is not only the big stuff. It's not only trees and the ocean. It's more than that. It's also the small stuff.
Yeah, I love the small things. I got very involved with bees for a moment in my life, where I started kind of beekeeping and then learning more about bee conservation, and then stopped beekeeping and wanted to just do like wild bee conservation. And that was kind of one of the first, when I came home, one of the first doorways that opened me up to, I was always looking for, how do I bring people to an interesting subject? So food has been a huge one for me. Working with food growing and teaching people how to grow food and implementing food gardens. And then bees for a moment was also that. So this tiny creature that we all know because of honey, but actually how much more it is and how fascinating bees are. And like on my Instagram, my social media, it's called Beneath the Leaf, which is a bit ridiculous, but it's because it's like, what is underneath the leaf? What are the small things that really, like the tiny five. I have guiding friends that are always like, what is instead of the big five, what is the tiny five that we don't talk about that actually is so important? And there's so much
Tell us
more
about
than
the
five.
tiny five. Tell us about.
No,
Yeah,
there's so
is it
many
too
more. You
much?
can't nail it down to five. Yeah.
But I love it. I love it what you say, beneath the leaf, to look underneath and to find the small, interesting things as well, not just the things that you can see. Layla, it's so lovely to speak to you. So your interest started as being interested in social work and then also nature with the microbiology. So it was there from the beginning, both worlds. And
Yeah.
now you're connecting both worlds.
Yeah, because I didn't actually end up studying either. So through
Yes.
my travels, I ended up learning.
Yeah.
And now I do find I'm so lucky to find myself, in that position in many ways that I wanted to be in when I was 18. So it's only 10 years later, if you really want
Yeah.
to know how young I am.
I wanted to know.
But
I wanted to know. You are but a puppy, but a very wise puppy. Very wise. So life has taught you many things, and life brought you to where you are now. And I'm very interested to hear more about the. You said you also were interested in the food growing and how to teach people how to grow food. Is that still now part of your project?
yeah, so with Six Kingdoms, I work with someone called Matthew. He's the founder of Six Kingdoms, and that is a ecological landscaping and land management business, a company. And so we've got a number of different things that we do, but food gardens are one of them. So we implement with private clients. We've also done a couple of school gardens for other organizations that bring us in. And we focus on organic food gardens. We're using permaculture principles. So we both trained in, he's an environmental scientist, and I've been trained for many years in permaculture. So we bring both of our knowledges together to implement food gardens for people. And then I also, in my other work, I have a allotment garden that I support. We have a hectare of land that's been given to us by a private farm on the edge of the Renendal community. It's a community called Kiruk up in Renendal, a small township. And on the edge of the township, there's a big private farm, and we've acquired a hectare of land rights with water rights there. And we've got 15 growers who grow their own food. And I just support that project. It runs on its own. People do their own thing, but we have a few different things going on the farm through a trust. So I also grow food there and bring in various people and run workshops. And
So how does it work? Do they grow food for themselves, or they share it or sell it? How does it work?
So we all together, we've developed kind of the goals of the project, and it started in COVID. So it's kind of similar to Kath's, to
Ah,
Spence Plus. I know you spoke to her a bit about
yes,
Spence Plus. So somewhat similar in the way that obviously at that time there was this huge call for food, and it was, the edge of disaster and so much uncertainty. So one guy came in. It was opened up by people who were there before me, to say that you can come and grow food here, and you've got to run it yourself and do it yourself, but you can grow food for your family. And then we've just grown on the momentum. I try to work in the work that I do very organically, and kind of following the motto of like, go where the energy is, instead of developing like a project and then going in and saying, oh, we should do this, because it doesn't work. And we really need to listen to people, and what is really on the ground, what is
sure.
needed or wanted, and what people have, like what are the skills that people actually have that they want to flourish in. So there was someone who came in, he wanted to grow food, and then he brought two friends, and they came in and started growing, and that's now grown and grown. And so the first customer is the self. So they first grow for themselves and their
Yeah.
families. And then some of them sell directly into the community. And one of them has actually stopped his day job, and now he's a full-time gardener there, on the allotment. And he sells to private clients or customers like all over the neighborhood as well. So all over the Rendell Road. Daniel, his name is, he's an amazing farmer. And so he's got a little bit more land than everyone else because he's really putting in the effort, and he's got a little spot where he's doing seedlings, and he's got worm farms,
Sure.
and he's doing
Wow.
awesome stuff.
I
Yeah.
like what you say is to really listen to what the needs are, because if we decide from the outside, we think what we know what the needs are, then it's not gonna work. So
Yeah.
you really sound like you did the right thing there to meet them where their needs are. Yeah.
Yeah, and really listening. I mean, I think because of the history of our country and the segregation and all our very, very complex issues, you know, it's imperative that we come together on common ground with things that we are all passionate about. And I think food is something that runs through every person, no matter who you are and what culture or income bracket you're in. Food is important. So, you know, that is a common ground to meet people and to listen to one another.
That's amazing. Luisteraars, ons het 'n wonderlike interessante gesprek met Layla vanaand en ek is sommer opgewonde oor die res van ons gesprek. Ons gaan nou 'n advertensiebreek neem en Layla het vir ons baie interessante musiek gekies. Layla, how do you pronounce Emoto? Emoto, is that correct?
Yeah, Emoto.
Emoto and Mlindo is the vocalist.
Lindo.
Mlindo.
Yeah.
So we're going to listen to this song, luisteraars, en geniet dit. Ons gesels net nou weer met julle verder. Welkom terug luisteraars en ons gesels met Layla Staegemann. Dit is vir my baie lekker om met haar te gesels. Ek en sy het nou so 'n bietjie gepraat tydens die breek en toe sê ek vir haar wat altyd vir my belangrik is as 'n sielkundige is dat as 'n mens baie depressief is en baie moedeloos en baie getraumatiseerd, is dit goed as mens bietjie buite jouself kyk en jy kan, as jy iets vir iemand anders kan doen, dan voel jy self beter. Layla, you understand what I'm saying. I feel if you're doing something for someone else, if you're giving, if you're putting time or effort into helping someone else, it makes you feel better. And I think during COVID, we all experienced that. You know, I experienced that. If a friend was ill and I could take her something, it made me feel involved and made me feel better. Tell us more about your projects.
I mean, so in regard to that, I think, you know, a lot of the time giving to other people makes us feel better when we are down and out, and also, you know, giving to ourselves in a way that's not just on the day to day. You know, I think so many people experience such deep mental health issues also because they're stuck in this constant momentum, you know, of movement, and they work and then they come home and they have families, and there's so much to do all the time. And I think we're in a very broken society in terms of never having time for ourselves, in
And
nature
also,
particularly.
I wanted to say, and they also disconnected from nature often.
Very much so. And I mean, we all have, no matter who you are. I think, you know, like I'm working with someone at the moment, and I spent time with him recently. He's a doctor of nature immersion or meaningful nature experiences. Like, he's got his doctorate in it, and they've started prescribing nature to people. You know, like, there's actually, you can get referred to nature, and it's, you know, seems so imperative, but it also seems so sad that that's where we are. Like, we should know that nature, we are not separate from it. You know, we spending time quietly in particularly a wild ecosystem is imperative for our natural, for our mental health. So one of our projects you wanted me to chat more about, I work for an organization called Cultural Connections, and we're based in the Eastern Cape. And our it's a bit of it's been going for quite a while now, but we've really feel like we've nailed the project, and now it's starting to get wonderful momentum, is something called the Eco Youth Circles. And so it's kind of based off of the traditional idea of eco youth clubs, where we take kids from after school and create safe spaces for them, particularly to learn about nature. But what we found is, so often, you know, like I said earlier, we want to learn about nature, and people want to get curious, but they can't get past their own, especially in South Africa, a lot of the time we've been so traumatized or have so many daily needs, that it's hard to go and spend the time in nature, or to be curious, or to get excited about things, because we're focusing on, you know, the everyday, putting food on our plates and trying to carry on. So we've developed a program that's we call it both inner and outer ecology. So we're working through a year-long process with a group. At the moment, it's 2 groups of youth, and we're building our capacity to be able to support people in other towns and cities in South Africa. Particularly, we love working in small rural spaces where there's not a lot of opportunities, to start their own eco youth circles. And so we've made a guide, and we have a facilitator's manual, And we work with a couple of different ways of thinking and various methodologies to work with the youth to look both inside at their traumas and their stress coping tools and emotional awareness, and positive daily routine and various worldviews and perspectives. And at the same time, so there's like a week on that, and then they've got 2 weeks on outer ecology. So learning about, we range from soil to plants to forests to night sky to the universe to stars, so various nature orientated learnings. And then they have also a week of active citizenship where they actually go out and work in their community to develop a project together. So that's really amazing. And we have 2 huge camps over the years. I've just spent 4 days with 26 teenagers in the bush just recently, and that was really amazing just to see how bringing both those things together, it seems unrealistic not to do that. Like we have to, and in all my work, I think that's also one of the overarching thing is holistic thinking. And so when we think about mental health and we think about our own everyday lives, like we have to consider all these parts, and that can be so complicated. But we can't think about it in isolation. Like, I'm not feeling good, like let me take this pill, or I'm not feeling good, like I'm only going to do the exercise that might make me feel better. It's like trying to think about, okay, well, why, address those root causes and spend the time in nature and look at your nutrition, which is complex, but I think we have the ability to do so if we really, take the time.
So Layla, what I like what you say. I never thought about that, about the inner and the outer ecology. That is so well described. The inner ecology is how everything inside is coexisting and feeding. If you
Yeah.
have negative thoughts, it's feeding the other negative thoughts, and the inner ecology. And if you can match that, so is it like camps? I was going to ask, is it on the school holidays? Is it school kids, or is it any youth?
Yeah, so we have we also we work with one group for a whole year. So we've got 2 groups at the moment in different places. So my role is I support the facilitators that are on the ground. In cultural connections, we have a lot of different programs, but one of our core focuses are training of trainers, or like support of those that are on the ground. So they are there, they're part of the community, they know their people, they know their culture, they have, and we interact a huge amount, and we share a lot between myself and the facilitator. So they run the show, they run the thing with the kids. And like the one in the one in the Karoo, they're both in the Eastern Cape. The one in the Karoo, it's near Graafrenet, and they meet actually every day because it's a very
Wow.
small township. And so Cultural Connections supports a space, we call it the club. It's like a safe space where we've got lots of different programs and people running things like dance clubs and homework clubs and food. There's a food growing component. And then our EYC, our Eco Youth Circle, meets there. And then the other one is in Tsitsikamma, and they meet once a week. And then there's a big camp to start it. And then in the middle, we go on a wilderness excursion, which will be up in the Eastern Cape, in the Karoo this time. I always think the one's not in the Eastern Cape because it's right on the border.
Okay.
So we're going to take all of them out, like right into a private nature reserve, just to camp out for the night. Because those can be very powerful, transformative experiences when they're just alone, just with each other, and they'll actually spend time in solitude as well, out in nature.
Oh, wow.
Um, and then we have a big camp to finish the year. But it's also a evolving and like kind of circular program where they can apply to come back as mentors for the next year. And then again, the 3rd year, so they start as a seed, and then they become a sapling, and then they become a tree. And when they're trees, they need to be able to facilitate sessions on the camps and facilitate learning experiences for their peers. And we hope to, through this process, we already have some connections with some wonderful philanthropists and organizations that will be able to offer possible like technicon spaces or further education for some of these youth that really show a lot of passion and a lot of fierce for what they're
I'm
doing.
sure you're seeing a lot of transformation through this. I'm sure when the
Yeah,
kids begin with this, when they're sapling or seeds, you can see how the uncertainty and how they gain confidence. I'm just thinking it's so absolutely amazing to help the youth not to get distracted by drugs and other and technology because everybody's now into technology and that's making them sick.
totally. And I mean, I think we underestimate the lack of invigoration and inspiration in a lot of the small towns in South Africa. You know, that we don't have, there's a lot that, you know, in this town in particular, there's not a huge amount of people doing stuff. And the people that, I mean, there's incredible people in the community that run programs for the community. But there's, you know, it's hard for them to get reach and grants and funding. And so a lot of the time the growth is stifled. So we also support them, like streamlining or act like as a conduit to be able to get funding to smaller organizations and individuals that are trying to start things up in these small places that are very often forgotten, and you know there's very little going on there. And so people go like, you know, oh, the people are on drugs, but it's also because they're super
Exactly.
traumatized because of everything that's gone on. And then there's very little support, and very, you know, the schools are also under resourced, so there's reasons for these things. So we're really trying to be where, you know, on the ground, what is actually happening, and support the people that are trying and motivated and have hope for these spaces.
And in the smaller towns, I'm sure the outer ecology is big enough. There's enough ladybirds
Well,
and bees
exactly. And a
and
lot of people are still so connected to, you know, felt medicine and growing, and but it's growing out, it's phasing out. It's a lot of the time it's the gogos and the omas and the opas and the people that are really passionate. And then there's this big gap, and a lot of the youth are, you know, really void of hope because they don't have that
yeah.
connection to the felt, which is inherently like there where they came from, and they want to be in the cities and they want to be reaching for money and better jobs and all these things. And so they're kind of in limbo and sometimes are lost in that space in between. So a lot of, you know, the work is also to remember and reignite that knowing and connection to their cultural roots, you know, and like I myself am just constantly learning and listening to people that are on the ground that know so much more than me about these particular cultural spaces.
If what we're talking about tonight, if this is, making some people curious, and maybe there's someone out there listening at this moment that thinks, oh, that sounds fantastic, I want to get involved. Where can they read more or find out more about Cultural Connections? Do you have a website?
Yeah, we've got a website, so it's www.culturalconnections.co.za. So they can read more there, and there's various options. There's options to donate or read more about the other programs. And we've also got social media in the Instagram page that will also link it to my Instagram page, where I also share a lot about our
Beneath the
projects.
leaf. Beneath the leaf. Onder die blaar, luisteraars.
Everybody
Onder die
laughs at that.
blaar. I think it's lovely. Oh, I think it's lovely. Onder die blaar. Ons gaan vir Layla kry onder die blaar. As ons
Yeah.
afsoek. Beneath the leaf. I love it. Sure, Layla, did you start writing about all of this stuff?
Yeah, I love writing actually. One of my side things that I am very passionate about is poetry, and writing. And so I have actually started collecting some various short stories about some of the work that I do. And I love doing poetry with the youth. It's something that a lot of our eco youth is also about creative storytelling and how do we tell our stories in a creative way. That's not just, you know, pencil on paper, but also around role play and poetry and acting and video making. And so we're trying to bring those things closer to the youth as well. And it's always a lot of fun on our camps. So we do quite a bit of writing together.
That I can hear that you're a writer. I can hear that in the way you speak. So is that also the cultural connections? Is that culture in many ways, like writing and
Um,
acting and a lot of other cultural stuff going on?
yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of our things in, you know, even our team, like we're all from such different worldviews and different perspectives, and you know, some of the ways in which we can interact in this very diverse country where we don't always see eye to eye or know truly what someone's trying to say. I think so often we connect through cultural events, like, you know, poetry is for me like the language in between languages. Like you don't, you know,
Like
you might,
music.
yeah, exactly. So you can say a poem in English, but you might reach so many people just through the way in which you say it. Or some of the, you know, the youth. I mean, my Afrikaans is not amazing, but I have to do a lot of sharing and teaching with them in Afrikaans, and they'll say a poem in Afrikaans, and I might not know really like completely
Yeah.
what it's about, but through their passion, they can express themselves. And so for sure, there's, I mean, and through so many cultures, there's song and dance, and I think so many of us are so disconnected from that way of you know, cultural roots and cultural identity. So I love having that and spending time with that.
Luisteraars, ons het so 'n heerlike gesprek en ons moet alweer 'n advertensiebreek neem. Ek kan dit nie glo nie. Kayla het vir ons nog 'n interessante ek hou van hierdie een, dis Brenda Fassie se Woelie Ndlela. Brenda Fassie, Woelie Ndlela. Lekker luister, ons gesels net nou weer verder. Welkom terug luisteraars. Ek hoop julle het dit ook soveel geniet soos ek. Ons gesels met Layla Staegemann. En Layla het so passie, sy en is so 'n groot understanding, so groot verstaan, 'n diep verstaan van die koneksie tussen mens en natuur en ook hoe die diskonneksie vir ons kan siek maak en alleen laat voel. En Layla, I'm passionate because your passion is contagious. Talk to us about, you mentioned 6 kingdoms. What is 6 kingdoms? You said it's a tree growing. Is it a gardening, eco gardening thing? So do
Yeah,
I
so
get them to come and give me a new garden, or what do I do if I involve them?
yeah, definitely. So Six Kingdoms is we have a few things that fall under the Six Kingdoms banner. And so as I said, Matthew co-host, he's the founder of Six Kingdoms, and I think he'll be able to say more about it, but very much founded through his connection and passion about human nature, connection and engagement. And so he does land, we do a few different things. So land management, which is invasive plant clearing. So a lot of the time people want to do restoration on their properties or gardens, but you can't because it's invaded with invasive plant species like wattles and blue gums and blackwoods. So we have a team, we've got a chipper, we come in and clear land in a particular way that also considers the indigenous vegetation, and our team is very knowledgeable. We're making sure constantly that we're not felling the wrong things or damaging whatever is there. So we try and hold whatever is there. And then we also chip that and then reuse that plant material to cover the ground or use as mulch in gardens. So that's kind of the one side. And then we have an ecological landscaping component. So we are both landscape designers, and we do from food gardens, as I said, to indigenous gardens. And you know, we're really passionate about the full system. So people that are, you know, there's so many people moving into the area, and so we love to work with people that really want to take a sensitive ecological approach to their landscape and not just, you know, take everything down and develop it and plant exotic species that might not suit our local environment and our local fauna. So we do holistic land context, which is, we'll actually go and have quite a personal and intimate session with people talking about their goals for their land, what they want to achieve. You know, a lot of people want to be fully self-sufficient, but have no idea how to get there. So we do that with people. And then Matthew also is partnered with EcoPool South Africa, and so he also offers the design and installation of natural pools, EcoPools, which are pools without chemicals, that are a biological system using various different types of filtration methods to create like the most incredible, beautiful pools with like rivers running into them. And so that's been wonderful. It's been in the last year that he started making that available for people in the garden route. And so yeah,
he's also in the garden route.
Yeah, so we both live, he lives in wilderness and I live here. So I design, I'm one of the designers. I work inside of the Six Kingdoms banner. And then we've also got 6 amazing guys that work with us on the day-to-day.
I want to ask you about that because my son said the other day to me that we must take out all the lawn, the kikuyu, excuse me, gras,
Yeah.
grasperk. He said to me, that is so unnatural. We must just put clover in. He said, and I said, but when I grew up, clover was seen as a weed. He said, no, clover is so good. So he's now starting to
Cool.
take out the lawn and putting clover in.
That's great. Yeah, that's a huge movement actually in the UK. It started
Is
with
it?
people taking out their lawns and creating like wild meadows,
Yeah.
particularly because then you're creating forage for insects and bees, and habitat for various creatures. You're helping the soil biology. So there's so much more from the diversity of wild meadows, or even something like Cape clover. Feeds the bees, letting it flower, and actually providing forage, as opposed to a more dead space being a lawn.
So he's not wrong.
Specifically, like,
He's
no, he's
absolutely
not
right.
wrong. Yeah, I mean, I have a soft spot for a little piece of lawn. I don't love a huge lawn, but a
Yeah.
bit, I love lying on the grass and under a
Yeah.
tree. But there's more indigenous grasses that you can use. Kikuyu is particularly it just takes over and goes into the
Yes.
gardens and doesn't do much. So
Yes. But
yeah,
I'll contact you to see what. So that's
yeah,
what you do. We can contact you and see how we can change our gardens into a more eco-friendly
yes.
um
Yeah, 100%.
place.
And we also work with water design, so looking at more sustainable water approaches and rainwater harvesting. So you can look, we've got a website, sixkingdoms.org, and there's all of our services and offerings are on there.
En so luisteraars, maak gerus gebruik daarvan en kontak gerus. Dit is so interessant. Die een is cultural connections waar jy kan meer leer oor die jeuggroepe wat eers saadjies begin en dan groot bome word. and they have a connection with nature, and the other one is six kingdoms. What
Yeah.
is why 6 kingdoms? Where
So
does that
it refers to the 6 kingdoms of life. Which is actually, I mean, now they say there's more of them, but it's because we work we don't just work with plants or just with soil. We want to try and work across the whole board and really
Oh,
connect the ecosystem.
oh. And I saw on your Instagram pictures, I saw some
Mhm.
beautiful pictures of young guys working in a garden, working in vegetable gardens. It looked like they really, really enjoying themselves if I look at their faces on the pictures. What was that? Was that the
Was
ecological, the
that
cultural connections?
was that on my personal
Yes,
Instagram?
yes.
Young guys working in veggie gardens. It could have been all number of people.
Okay.
Could have, it depends. Could have been my partner. Could have, yeah. So like I can't think of which
It
one it
doesn't
might have been,
matter.
but it might have been it's our team, our Six Kingdoms team. We do work with young guys that are from the Wilderness Heights area, and they are very passionate. They're learning so much,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, and they work with us. They're
And do
part of
they
the
then
team.
take it into their community as well, the ideas?
I
Or
think some of them do, sure,
yeah.
yeah. And I mean, they've definitely shown so much more understanding of, we're really trying to get away from the traditional like employer-employee relationship and the treating of someone as labor. We do have a traditional business model and we have to adhere to many things, but we're really trying to engage them in more learning and really like inspiring that curiosity in them as well, not just, I think so often things are so busy that it's very hard to engage with your laborer, as I hate to call, they're not for
Yeah.
us, they are fully part of the team, but in
Yeah.
like furthering their education of what's happening. So like even soon we're hopefully going to be going on a hike together as a team to really like learn from nature. So that's something we really try and encourage, is like, look around, look in the forest, look at the plant communities, how are they laid out, look at the rivers, how the rocks put into the,
Sure.
how has nature created this, because nature is our biggest and best teacher in so many things, and in our landscaping that's really what we refer to all the time, because that's our main focus and passion, are more wild landscapes. We have done quite a lot of urban gardens as well, like urban indigenous gardens. But where we can, we love to do more habitat creation and restoration, so on bigger properties. And yeah, the guys are, and I do think they take it home when they have time.
Of
It's busy.
course. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course. But it sounds like you're learning from nature, but also learning from each other.
fully. Yeah,
Yeah,
always.
yeah. Oh, Layla, I want to be a fly against your wall sometimes and come see what you're doing there. Do you invite people to come, and do you give workshops, or how can people become involved with you guys, or how can they learn more?
So with Six Kingdoms, I mean, the best way that we interact with people at the moment, we have done workshops in the past. We've at the moment we're just really, really busy. So maybe in the future we will open up another space to do a couple of workshops, particularly around food growing or using indigenous plants. But the best way to connect with us is if you're wanting any of the, changing something in your garden or creating more of a diverse space or an eco pool or a food garden. I think every home should grow a little bit of spinach or at least their herbs, and
Yeah.
introduce that into their eating. It's difficult to grow food, it doesn't. It's not your cat's tail. They made
Yeah.
me laugh.
Yeah,
You've
it
also got
really
nature right there.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy. I think a lot of people underestimate how it is difficult to grow food. And that scares a lot of people away. So we really try and make it as easy as possible. And also, it doesn't have to be everything. Like I really am an advocate for community sufficiency more than self-sufficiency, because I think that's how people have survived best in the past, is being able to share. And if your whole neighborhood was all growing a little bit of something and you committed to sharing those things and exchanging, I think that's a far more resilient model of growing food than it is to try and do everything yourself, because that often
Yes.
just becomes overwhelming and then you stop.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So it brings back the sense of community again, of sharing and caring. Sharing is
Yes.
caring.
Yeah.
Caring is sharing. What message do you have for the listeners? How can they become more connected? How can they work on their own connection with nature?
I think one of the most profound experiences for me in the last year was taking the time for myself to go and spend, I mean, it was extremely privileged, but to go spend a week in a wild space, it was a guided retreat up in the Eastern Cape. And I really think, if you have the capacity and the privilege to treat yourself, which it shouldn't be, but to really spend, whether it's a day hiking or 2 days out on an overnight hike, especially if you live in the garden route, like we owe it to our environment to really spend time and away from phones and not taking pictures all the time and really being present and connecting with our senses in nature. I think if there's one thing that I say to everyone, it's like, spend that time, take the time to slow down and actually be with nature, because you find so much comes up in your thoughts during that time, and little epiphanies and revelations and things that happen when we really spending time in nature. And if you can take somebody who might not have that chance normally, if it's taking people or someone who might work for you or somebody who you're connected with that doesn't have that chance, to go together and revel in like nature's wonders together, or the ocean, or I think so many people, unfortunately, wild spaces, nature is everywhere. I think we are nature, but wild spaces have become quite exclusive, and there's national park gates, and there's entrance fees, and there's all these things to go into like really, really beautiful wild ecosystems. So if you can take people that don't normally go and haven't had that chance, or don't often get it, I think that's a really wonderful thing to do, is just spend time in wild spaces, just as people, like person to person, instead of in a different kind of relationship.
And I like what you say about taking someone who doesn't have the opportunity always. I think that's a great way of giving. And I think to use the senses, all the senses when you're out there, listen to nature, watch it, and experience it, feel it, smell it.
Yeah, and if you can't always get out there and you have a tiny space, create a diverse space in your garden that you can sit in a square meter and have the most amazing experiences with nature. It doesn't have to be in the mountains, it could be just staring at an earthworm or watching a bee collecting pollen on one flower that you have in your garden. It doesn't matter how small your space is. I think there's always chance that you can connect with nature and have those, sparks of curiosity that really open up so many doors and so many pathways in your mind. And I think you can bring it to you as well.
Well, you inspired me to go look underneath the leaves now. I'm going to definitely see what I see. I'm going to try and look through your eyes.
Yeah, I see what you see. Tell me.
See what I see underneath the leaves.
Yeah.
Oh, Layla, it was such a pleasure having this chat with you. I really appreciate it. And I definitely think we're going to follow up maybe in a few months' time and see where you are and what happened next for you. It sounds amazing. Luisteraars, ons gaan afsluit met die laaste liedjie wat Layla vir ons gegee het. Layla, now you must help me with the pronunciation. Ndihambanawe. Did I say it correctly?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it feels nice. Ndihambanawe.
It
From
is.
Mafiki Zulu. Did I say
Yeah,
it
Mafiki
correctly?
Zolo, yeah.
Mafiki Zulu. So luisteraars, geniet dit saam met ons. Layla het vir ons sulke lekker musiek gebring wat pas absoluut by die natuur en by Afrika. Ons is so bevoorreg om in Afrika te wees. You know what, Layla, I was overseas and when I was there, I realized that their nature has been raped so many times. It's like our nature still has got a smell. The minute I land in South Africa, there's a distinctive, I could smell the rivers. That you don't do in Europe.
I traveled for such a long time and I get asked all the time, why didn't you stay overseas? You were young, you had that opportunity, and look what's happening to our country and all these things, and yes, there's lots of things going on, but I spent time in New Zealand and incredible places, and there is no place like South Africa with, our nature and our diversity and our flora, and we are so lucky. We can be seriously grateful for that every day.
Thank you so much. Geniet dit luisteraars en lekker
Thanks,
aand.
Chanel.